Larson wins and locks himself into the playoffs. Ryan Blaney gets disqualified, and Martin Truex Jr. and James Small had an interesting pit strategy. Let's get into it. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. All right, a lot to talk about in this one, so let's get to it. Kyle Larson, win number 4 on the season, but this one locks him in to the championship race in Phoenix. Win number 10 for Hendrick, I think, and win number 17 for Chevrolet. In fact, if we want to look at those manufacturer points, which nobody really talks about, here is your manufacturer standings. Right here, you can see that Chevrolet with 17 wins, 9 wins for Toyota, and 7 wins for Ford. Not as big a gap, though, as you would think in the championship. So if Toyota can go on a run, maybe they can take it from Chevrolet, but Chevrolet looks like they're in command as it stands right now. But that wasn't the main story, of course. Martin Truex Jr. and Christopher Bell had probably, and Kyle Busch as well. He ends up finishing third. We'll get to that in just a second. But they had long-run cars. Kyle Larson had a short-run car. And you saw at the very end, Christopher Bell did everything he could do, gained a lot of people's respect by racing cleanly there. A lot of people were like, hey, I just would have wrecked him to advance to the playoffs. Christopher Bell chose not to do that. He chose to race with respect. And in the post-race interview, Kyle Larson said as much. But he, like I said, him, Martin Truex Jr., and Kyle Busch looked like they had long-run cars. So all these restarts and stuff actually hurt them. But that wasn't the only thing that hurt Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. at the midpoint of the race there, for whatever reason, decided to stay out on 10-lap old tires. I guess I'm not trying to second guess James Small because he doesn't need my opinion on this. He's got more like Cup victories than I do. But I guess his rationale there was he was thinking more cars were going to stay out. So they played a track position game. It didn't work out for him. That buried Truex deep in the pack. But at the end of the race, Truex was able to make up those positions and end up finishing in 9th place, which was then bumped up to 8th place. But before I get to why it was bumped up to 8th place, let's look at that top 10. You got Kyle Larson, of course, winning. Christopher Bell finishes second. Valiant effort for second place. Kyle Busch finishes third. Never could get the track position he wanted, like I said, on all those restarts. He just didn't have a good car at the beginning of the run, but then at the end of the run, he had it going on. Brad Keselowski finishes fourth. There were points in this race where Brad Keselowski looked like he was going to challenge for the win. All the Six Camp and the Brad Keselowski fans were almost had something to cheer about there. It's a great run for him. Ross Chastain, he at the latter stages of this race looked like he had a car that might do something. Then he brushed the wall, lost some track position, wasn't much of a factor after that. William Byron continues his good run in the playoffs, finishes 6th. Tyler Reddick finishes 7th. He needed that run to help his points effort. Martin Truex Jr., like I said, finishes 8th. Denny Hamlin ends up 9th, would have been 10th, and we'll get to that in just a second right after this. But then Chris Buescher gets the 10th place finish, so good run for him. And even though he finished 10th, he's still at a bit of a points deficit, so we'll get into that in just a minute as well. But you noticed Ryan Blaney's name wasn't there. Ryan Blaney originally finished 6th, I think, but he was found later in the post-race tech to have an illegal shock, and apparently the eye-to-eye didn't match up or something like that. I don't know exactly what happened, so let's look at what Brian Murphy had to say about it. Brian Murphy, of course, former SHR employee. Why do damper links matter? Each Olin shock has the same amount of legal stroke, but each corner of the car has a different minimum damper length, ultimately dictating the dynamic ride height, dynamic meaning the car when it's in motion, teams can achieve. A lower vehicle comes with an array of mechanical and aerodynamic benefits. So there you go. The modification to the shock seems to have been for an aero advantage, according to Brian Murphy, so I'll take his word for it because he knows far more about the aero side of it than I would ever dream to imagine. So looks like they were trying to get some type of aero advantage. They got caught in post-race tech. A lot of people are like, how come they never catch these things in pre-race? Well, if you think about it, pre-race, they have to look at all 38 to 40 cars, however many cars run that weekend. In post-race, they only have to look at a handful of cars. And when you only have to look at a handful of cars, you have more time to look at those handful of cars. So that's typically why they catch more people post-race than they do pre-race. But so that answers the question about how come they don't catch anybody pre-race. That's why. All right, on to the points. Of course, Kyle Larson locks in. He is locked in to the Phoenix round, so they get all the R&D time, all the focus. They can now just put it on Phoenix, although he is really good at Miami, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him do well there. William Byron is second place at plus 11 right now, so even the second place man can't feel super comfortable. Nobody can have a bad race from here on out. Denny Hamlin at plus 4, and Martin Truex Jr. right now, your last driver in at plus 3. Then you got Christopher Bell at -3, Tyler Reddick at -15. Both of those guys can still basically points race. Then it gets a little dicey as you get down here toward the bottom. Chris Buescher, if he has a really good race and scores a bunch of stage points, he can delete that number to minus 23, but minus 23 is basically a full race, so he's going to have to do something. He's almost in win or go home situation, but not quite yet. But then you get to Ryan Blaney here at the bottom. Because of that disqualification, that minus 56, Ryan Blaney has to win a race going forward, or he is going to be out of these playoffs. I don't see a path for him to get there points-wise, so he is just... Next 2 races, Ryan Blaney has to get a win, or he is not going to make it to the championship finale at Phoenix. And that brings me to bad race, of course, for Ryan Blaney. We've beat that one to death already. And also a bad race for Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott, the number 9, is in the owner's points, and he came into this in 8th place in owner's points. And even with the Blaney disqualification, the 9 car is still in 8th place in owner's points because Chase Elliott finished 32nd in this race. He's going to have to rebound and recover. The owner's points are a lot closer, of course, than the actual playoff points right now, though. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see what happens going forward. But all right, that was a crazy post-race. The race finish itself was crazy. The race itself I thought was pretty good as well. So good Las Vegas race. But let me know down in the comments what you thought about the race, what you think about the DQ or anything else I talked about here. Would love to hear about it. If this is your first time to the channel, would love to have your subscription. Hopefully I earned it. If not, I'll just keep making these until I do. And if you want to visit the merch store to help out the channel, it would be much appreciated. The link is in the description. And other than that, thanks for your time. Peace.